I had crossed seas of sapphire light to reach Emberhold, leaving behind the cool embrace of the Water Kingdom for a land that burned with fury even at dawn. The air itself seared my lungs as though I were breathing embers instead of breath. The palace was no less daunting. Obsidian spires stabbing at the heavens, rivers of molten rock threading like veins of fire through its foundations. This was to be my new home. This was where I would bind my life to Prince Kaji of Fire. From the moment I stepped onto Emberhold's blackened stone, I felt the gazes of the fire court pierce through me. Women draped in scarlet silks, men with eyes like smoldering coals. I had been told from birth that fire and water were complements. Fire's burning fury tempered by water's calm, water's stagnant cold enlivened by fire's heat. Together, we were supposed to be balance. But balance was a myth. For centuries, my foremothers had been sent to Emberhold. The fire princes gained long life from water blood. Their brides returned nothing but ashes and whispers. This marriage was no different, and Kaji made sure I understood it. He stood at the great obsidian gate, taller than I had imagined, his hair the color of midnight flame, his eyes sharp as molten glass. For one fragile heartbeat, I thought I saw intrigue in his gaze. Then his mouth curled in disdain. So this is the bride they send me? His voice was low, cutting, laced with fire's arrogance. A tide-born girl with no flame in her veins. I expected more. The courtiers tittered like vultures circling the dying. Heat rose in my cheeks, but I forced my chin high. I am Princess Daria of the Water Kingdom. I came not for your pleasure, but to honor our people's oath of alliance. He stepped closer, and though the flames etched in his aura burned against my skin, I did not flinch. Then honor it silently. Do not think to command me in my own land. The cruelty in his words should have crushed me, but instead it hardened me. Already I knew. This marriage would not be harmony. It would be war. That night, before the assembled fire court, the high oracle came forth, robed in crimson and gold. In her hands she carried the twin relics of our bond, a chalice of molten flame and a vessel of still water. By the will of the ancients, she intoned, her voice echoing like a spell, the sacred oath shall bind you. Respect is the chain. Balance is the weight. Betray the oath, and the very elements will consume you. I pressed my palm over the vessel of water, feeling its cool rush steady me. Kaji laid his hand on the chalice of fire, flames dancing against his skin. The oracle's gaze pierced us both. Swear it. I swear, I said, my voice carrying through the chamber, to honor respect, lest the waters still within me turn to ice and entomb my soul. Kaji's lips curved in a mocking smile. And I swear, he said carelessly, to grant respect, lest fire's fury eat me alive. The oath sealed. A ripple of energy surged between us, hot and cold colliding, binding. My veins tingled with the touch of ancient power. His aura flared, as though daring the oath to try him. The court applauded. The Fire King nodded in grim approval. The Queen's smile was sharp as glass. But I saw the flicker in Kaji's eyes. He did not fear the oath. He believed himself above it. And that was when I knew. His fire would burn me, and I would either drown in it or rise from it. Life in Emberhold was a trial by fire. The palace walls wept heat. Even in the dead of night, flames flickered in every brazier, their light pressing against me like chains. Servants whispered behind my back. Courtiers smirked when I passed, their jeweled eyes mocking the way I moved as though the floor itself burned me. But the sharpest cruelty came from the man who should have been my ally. Kaji. The day after our oath, he did not appear at my side in the banquet hall. Instead, he sent me alone, a bride with no groom, forced to smile while courtiers whispered of weakness. Later, when I confronted him, he only laughed. Do you expect me to parade you like a prize? His eyes blazed with scorn. I did not ask for this union, and I will not pretend to cherish it. The oath shivered between us, subtle, silent, but he ignored it, walking away before I could answer. Days blurred into nights of humiliation. He flaunted his mistresses, invited me to feasts where fire mages displayed their raw power while sneering at my fragile waves. When I tried to speak, he cut me down with a single glare. Respect me as your husband, Daria, he said once, voice low with warning, or you will regret it. Regret. As though I hadn't already felt the weight of centuries of sacrifice pressing on my shoulders. But even in the flames, water finds its path. It was in Emberhold's gardens, if one could call scorched basalt and the occasional thorn bush a garden, that I first met Kasai. He was Kaji's younger brother, though their resemblance ended at blood. Where Kaji burned like an untamed inferno, Kasai was steady fire, controlled, precise, eyes lit with thought rather than arrogance. He found me standing by the obsidian fountain, my hand hovering over its steaming water. "You cool the flames without fear," he said, his tone gentle, curious. I turned, startled. "And you watch without mocking?" His lips curved, but not cruelly. "I see no weakness in water, princess. Only patience. Only strength." For a moment I could not speak. No one in Emberhold had spoken to me so, not since I had arrived. The words were simple, yet they eased a wound I hadn't realized was bleeding. But comfort was dangerous. I reminded myself that Kasai, too, was fire, bound to this court that feasted on my humiliation. Still, his presence lingered in my thoughts. As the days turned to weeks, Kaji's cruelty sharpened. He delighted in reminding me that fire's line had thrived on water's brides for generations. "Your people have always bent," he sneered. "Do not think you will be the first to stand." Each word was a blade. But I bore them, because the oath bound me to endurance. And because I had begun to notice something he did not. When he raged, when he mocked me, the fire in his veins flared too hot. His aura flickered, unstable. His hands trembled when he thought no one watched. The oath was not silent. It was waiting. And though I remained outwardly still, like deep water hiding its current, inside I swore that when it rose against him, I would not hold it back. Kasai was not meant to linger in my life. He should have been no more than a shadow at court, a younger son destined to stand at the edges of his brother's flame. Yet it was always him I found in Emberhold's quiet corners, where fire burned softer and eyes were not watching. He carried himself differently from the others. Where Kaji strode with arrogance, Kasai moved like tempered steel, controlled, balanced. His fire was not a weapon always eager to burn. It was a hearth flame, steady and enduring. "You do not belong here," he told me one evening as we walked along the molten river threading through the palace grounds. The lava pulsed like a heart, throwing sparks into the air. I lifted my chin, unwilling to show weakness. "And yet here I am." "You endure," he admitted, studying me with an intensity that made my breath falter. "Water should vanish against fire, but you do not. You bend, yes, but you do not break." His words caught me off guard. I had grown used to mockery, to scorn whispered behind jeweled hands. To hear strength in what others called weakness, it was dangerous. I should have walked away. But I did not. We met again and again. Sometimes in the training halls, where he sparred with his soldiers and taught me how fire could be guided, not just unleashed. Sometimes in the library of ash-scented scrolls, where we compared the tales of our kingdoms. Stories of ancient floods and wildfires, disasters born when water and fire clashed without respect. "Perhaps that is why the oath was created," Kasai murmured once, running his fingers over a brittle parchment. "To force our people to remember that fire and water can sustain each other, if only pride does not destroy them first." I looked at him then, truly looked, and saw not a prince shaped by cruelty, but a man struggling under the same legacy that bound me. A man who bore the same fire, yet carried it with care. Still, I kept my heart guarded. "Your brother does not believe in the oath." "No," Kasai said softly. "He believes only in himself. That will be his ruin." There were moments when silence spoke more than words. When his gaze lingered too long, when my hand brushed his as he offered me a scroll, when his voice softened in ways that felt like secrets. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself it was wrong. I told myself my heart could not betray the oath, even as Kaji shattered it with every cruel breath. But water carves stone not in a day, but with patience. And slowly, Kasai carved his place into me. The oath began as a whisper. At first, it was nothing more than a shiver in my veins whenever Kaji's words grew too sharp, whenever his hand struck the air too close to me in rage. The court saw only his triumphs, the displays of flame, the arrogance of power. But I saw the tremor in his fingers when he thought himself unseen. I heard the strain in his voice, like fire roaring through a hearth too small to contain it. And each time the oath pulsed. Waiting. Watching. Kasai noticed, too. "You are not safe with him," he told me one night, his voice hushed beneath the molten glow of the palace's hanging lanterns. His eyes caught the light, softer than his brother's but just as piercing. I folded my arms, though my chest ached at his words. I swore the oath. I am bound to him. Kasai's jaw tightened. Bound does not mean broken. He dishonors you. He dishonors the pact. His nearness unsettled me. Not with fear, but with the warmth he carried, the kind of fire that did not burn but comforted. Too easily, I found myself leaning toward him. And too quickly I pulled back. If I fell, would it not be betrayal of my own? Yet water flows where it must. Our meetings became inevitability. In the libraries, in the training yards, at the edges of Emberhold's scorched gardens where few cared to walk. He showed me fire not as destruction, but as life, the flame that warms, the fire that guides. In return, I showed him water's patience, the way rivers carve mountains not with rage, but with persistence. Together we could create balance, Kasai said one evening, his hand brushing mine as he guided a stream of flame into the palm of my water. Steam hissed between us, not violent, but gentle. Not the false balance of tradition. A true one. His words shook me more than I wanted to admit, because even as he spoke them, Kaji's cruelty grew sharper. The court whispered of his temper. Servants left his chambers in tears. And when he stood before me demanding obedience, the oath flared in warning, a heat that seared his veins, a chill that tightened my chest. One night, during a feast, he dragged me forward before the gathered nobles. "Bow," he ordered, voice loud enough for all to hear. "Bow to your prince as your mothers before you did." The hall silenced. Firelight crackled. I raised my chin, refusing. "Respect is not slavery, Kaji. The oath binds us both." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Kaji's face darkened, fury flickering wild in his aura. He reached for me, but the moment his hand neared, the oath struck. Flame erupted, not from his command but from within him, searing his skin, his veins. He staggered, clutching his chest as though fire clawed at him from the inside. The court erupted in chaos. Nobles shouted, servants fled. The king's voice thundered, the queen's face twisted in fear. But my eyes found only Kasai, his expression torn between horror for his brother and something deeper, sharper, as his gaze locked with mine. The oath had awakened, and Kaji's fire was no longer his own. Kaji's screams haunted Emberhold. Day by day his body withered, though his fire only grew wilder. The oath gnawed at him, devouring his balance, flooding him with young mana he could not contain. His skin blistered, cracked, healed only to burn again. At night, his chambers glowed red from the flames that burst unbidden from his body, scorching tapestries, turning stone black. The healers spoke of imbalance. The priests whispered of judgment. The courtiers called it a curse. But I knew the truth. It was the oath demanding its due. The king summoned me first. His voice was like molten iron, heavy and merciless. "You will forgive him." I stood before the obsidian throne, my hands clasped to still their trembling. Forgiveness is not enough. The oath demands honor. He broke it. The queen's eyes, lined with kohl and grief, narrowed. "If you love this alliance, child, you will bend. Our kingdoms cannot afford your stubborn pride." My pride. As though their son's cruelty had been mine to bear, mine to cause. But before I could answer, Kasai spoke. He had not been invited to the council, yet he stepped forward, his voice steady. "The oath cannot be undone by command. If it is broken, it will consume him." She speaks truth. The king's gaze darkened. "And what would you know of sacred fire, boy?" Kasai did not flinch. "Enough to know you would burn the Water Kingdom's princess to ashes before admitting your heir is unfit." The chamber fell into brittle silence. I should have feared for him. Defying the Fire King was no small thing. Yet I felt only a quiet surge in my chest, like a tide rising against the shore. Kasai's defiance was not for himself, but for me. And in that moment, I was no longer alone. Kaji's condition worsened. He raved through fevered nights, cursing my name, begging for my touch, then swearing he would see me drowned. The court tiptoed around him, fearing both his madness and his fire. It was during one of these nights that the queen came to me in secret. Her face was pale, her silks hastily thrown over her nightgown, her voice trembling as she clutched my wrist. "Save him. You can heal him, your water, your balance. You can draw out the excess fire before it destroys him." I pulled back, my heart aching but firm. The oath was not mine alone. If I mend what he broke, then I dishonor myself, and the gods who bind us. Tears filled her eyes. For all her severity, she was still a mother watching her son wither. "Then do it for me, for the sake of a mother's heart." Her plea shattered something inside me. But it was not enough to sway me. Kasai found me after, his expression carved from shadow. "Do not let them make you their sacrifice. If Kaji burns, it is his own hand that lit the fire." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to stay strong. But the truth lingered heavy in my chest. If I let Kaji die, the Fire Kingdom would call it murder. The Water Kingdom would be blamed. The alliance would shatter. And war might follow. The choice pressed in on me from all sides, a crown of thorns tightening, until only one truth remained clear. Whatever I decided, I would not emerge unchanged. Kaji's chambers became a furnace. The guards posted outside flinched at every scream, every blast of heat that buckled the iron-banded doors. Servants were forbidden to enter. Only healers dared, and half of them never returned, driven back by firestorms or broken by the venom of his words. I should have stayed away. But the oath bound me to him still, and each flare of his suffering echoed through my veins. So I went. The first time, I found him crouched by the window, his skin glowing faintly, hair damp with sweat. The air was thick with smoke, the stones of the walls weeping molten cracks. "Daria," he rasped, eyes burning fever-bright. "You've come to watch me die." I stepped cautiously closer, the cool aura of my water rising instinctively to shield me from the heat. "I came because the oath ties us. I feel your pain." He laughed, the sound jagged, hollow. "Feel it then. Feel me burn. This is what your defiance has done." I shook my head, though my throat tightened. "You brought this upon yourself, Kaji. The oath is not mine alone." His expression twisted. In one breath he lunged toward me, seizing my wrist, his skin scorching hot. In another he collapsed, trembling, clutching his chest as fire licked up his veins. "Save me," he screamed, half plea, half command. "You can. You must. You are mine, and you will heal me." The oath pulsed violently, punishing his demand. He doubled over, coughing blood, sparks sizzling in the crimson spatter on the stones. I fled then, my heart pounding, but his cries followed me down the corridors. "If I burn, you will drown with me." The second time, days later, his fury had sharpened. "Traitor!" he roared as soon as I stepped inside. His eyes were bloodshot, his lips cracked. Flames writhed around his hands, uncontrolled. "You turn my brother against me," whispering poison into his ears. "Do you think I don't see how he looks at you?" I froze. His words struck too close. "Kasai has done nothing but—" "Silence!" he bellowed, and the fire surged. The chamber walls blackened further, smoke curling like serpents. "He wants what is mine. You think I don't know? He has always envied me, my power, my crown, you." For a moment the fire faltered, and I glimpsed not the prince but the boy beneath, frightened, desperate, clinging to control that slipped like sand through his fingers. Then he fell to his knees, clawing at his chest. "Please," he whispered, broken. "Help me. Don't let me die like this." Tears burned my eyes. For all his cruelty, for all the scars he had left on me, this was still a man unraveling before my eyes. But my voice was steady when I answered. "The oath is not mine to heal. You broke it, and the gods have judged." His scream tore through the palace, shaking the very stones. By the third visit, he was no longer wholly himself. He paced the chamber in rags of scorched silk, hair tangled, eyes wild. He muttered to unseen voices, cursed at shadows, laughed at nothing. The oath's fire had become his tormentor, gnawing from within. When he saw me he froze, then smiled, a smile too wide, too sharp. "Wife, my beautiful little stream. I dreamed of you drowning. So peaceful. Shall I give you that mercy?" Flames coiled up his arms, spilling into the air like serpents. My water surged in answer, a shield forming instinctively around me. "Kaji," I whispered, heart hammering, "this is not you." His grin faltered. For one fragile heartbeat his eyes softened, as if he might break, as if he might beg again. Then the madness returned, and he hurled fire at me with a scream. The oath struck him down instantly. The flames recoiled, searing his own skin, racking him with convulsions. He collapsed, writhing, sobbing and cursing my name. I could not move, could not breathe. All I could do was watch as the prince I had been bound to, the heir of fire, crumbled into ash before me. By then, the court no longer whispered of a curse. They spoke of punishment. And though I had not touched him, they began to look at me as if I were the executioner. The palace could no longer contain Kaji. His screams rattled the obsidian walls, his flames scorching corridors. Even the bravest guards refused to tread. The oath's judgment had hollowed him out, filling his veins with raw mana until he was little more than a vessel for destruction. It ended in the throne hall. Summoned by the king's decree, I entered to find the royal family gathered. The nobles pressed into the shadows, their silks drawn close, their faces pale. At the center, Kaji writhed on the marble floor, skin blistered, eyes wild, fire erupting in fits from his body. Chains of enchanted steel bound him, but they glowed red-hot, struggling to contain him. The queen fell to her knees beside me, clutching my gown, her tears scorching against my resolve. "Daria, please. Heal him. Save my son. You alone can cool the fire consuming him." The king's voice thundered, though even he sounded desperate beneath his fury. "This marriage binds kingdoms. If he dies, the Fire Kingdom will not forget where blame lies. If you love peace, you will forgive. Forgive." The word tasted like ash. I looked down at Kaji, the prince who had scorned me, humiliated me, struck me with words and fire alike. His lips parted, a raw whisper escaping. "Daria, please. I am burning." My heart ached, but I remembered every wound, every cruelty, every night I had wondered if I would survive him. Then Kasai's voice broke through the clamor. "Let him fall." All eyes turned. He stood tall at the edge of the hall, his gaze fixed on me, unwavering. The oath was sacred. He spat on it, on her, on the gods themselves. To mend him now is not mercy but mockery. The queen sobbed. The king's face contorted with rage. "You would condemn your own brother?" Kasai's jaw tightened. He condemned himself. Silence fell heavy. Kaji's screams rose, fire bursting in violent arcs that singed the banners of fire's eternal glory. The oath pulsed in me, a cold certainty. If I chose to heal him, I could cool his fire, but I would take his burden into myself. His madness. His imbalance. His doom. If I let him burn, he would die, slowly, agonizingly, until nothing remained but ash. The queen gripped my hand. "If you do this, if you walk away, his death is on your soul." Kasai's eyes found mine. Steady. Fierce. "No. His death is his own. Yours is the choice to live." The hall waited, the entire court holding its breath. I knelt beside Kaji, my fingers brushing the blistered skin of his arm. His eyes met mine, wild with terror, with pain. For a heartbeat, I saw the boy he might once have been, proud, strong, meant to lead a kingdom. For another, I saw the man he had become, cruel, weak beneath his fire, undone by his own arrogance. The tide rose in me, clear and cold. "I release you, Kaji," I whispered. "Not with forgiveness, but with truth. You broke the oath. And now the fire claims what you kindled." The oath flared, brilliant, searing, and the chains shattered. Fire consumed him from within, a storm of red and gold, until nothing remained but ash scattered across the marble. The queen's wail split the air. The king's roar shook the walls. Nobles fled, but I stood unmoved. My heart was steel wrapped in water, my gaze locked with Kasai's. The alliance was broken, but I was no longer its prisoner. In the days that followed, the Fire King demanded retribution. He wished to bind me again, to seal me to another son, to salvage the centuries-old pact. But the oath had marked me already. I was free of Kaji, and no chains, sacred or political, could bind me without my consent. Kasai came to me in the ruins of the garden, where fire-scorched earth met the waters I had coaxed back into bloom. He did not speak of crowns or treaties, only of balance, of fire and water not at war, but in harmony. And when I placed my hand in his, it was not as prisoner nor pawn, but as myself, Daria, Princess of Water, who had faced fire and emerged unburned. The Fire Kingdom trembled in the wake of Kaji's death. The court was divided. Some called me a curse, whispering that I had bewitched the air, that my water magic had smothered his flame. Others spoke of prophecy, that the oath itself had chosen me as its instrument, punishing Kaji through my endurance. The truth rippled through Emberhold like molten rock beneath the surface. Their heir had perished, not by war, not by enemy, but by his own broken word. The king roared in fury, demanding vengeance. "The Water Kingdom shall pay for my son's death." His voice shook the obsidian throne room. His fists clenched until sparks leapt from his knuckles. But the queen, pale with grief, broke her silence. Her voice was thin, brittle as cracked glass. "No. He brought this upon himself. The oath chose. To deny it now is to deny the gods." Her words silenced even the angriest lords. For if the queen, who had wept over her son's ashes, could name the oath just, who dared defy her? Still the threat of war simmered. Messengers carried rumors across borders, to the Water Kingdom and beyond. The centuries-old alliance, long tilted in fire's favor, now wavered like a flame in the wind. I remained in Emberhold, not as widow nor prisoner, but as witness. Nobles avoided me, servants bowed too low, the priests lingered at my door with fearful prayers. Yet in the shadows of isolation, Kasai's presence was steady. He did not shield me from the court's whispers. He did not promise safety without struggle. Instead, he offered partnership. "Let them speak," he said one evening as we stood above the city walls, the molten rivers below casting eerie light on his face. "They fear what they do not understand. They will learn. Fire does not destroy water, and water does not smother fire. Together, they temper one another. You and I can show them." His hand brushed mine, tentative, not possessive. His fire was not Kaji's wild inferno. It was a hearth, a steady flame against the darkness. The Water King sent envoys soon after, demanding explanation for Kaji's death. The Fire King thundered in council, declaring betrayal, but the Queen and Kasai stood firm. I was summoned to the hall, where both kingdoms' voices clashed like storm and blaze. I lifted my chin, letting my voice carry. The oath was not broken by water. It was broken by fire. Kaji dishonored the pact. The gods judged. And I, the vessel of their bond, bore witness. If you would strike me for his death, you strike the gods themselves. A hush fell. Even the Fire King's fury faltered. For in my words truth rang, undeniable, terrible. Kasai stepped forward then, standing beside me. If war is what you want, father, then you will burn your own people before you ever drown hers. But if peace is what you claim to value, then see what stands before you now, fire and water, not in conflict but in balance. Let this be the new pact. The queen, weary and hollow, gave her assent. Let it be so. And with that, the centuries-old alliance reshaped itself. No longer fire's dominance over water, but a partnership forged in blood, betrayal, and renewal. In the years that followed, songs would be sung of the oath's judgment, of the prince consumed by his own fire, and the princess who stood unbroken. But those songs were not mine. Mine was quieter, steadier, the story of water and fire learning to flow together. Of a kingdom scarred by loss, learning to kindle itself anew. And when the rivers of Emberhold steamed against its molten stones, I saw in their rising mist the truth of what we had built. From ashes and tide, a new balance had been born.